Unless this is part two, you're done. You don't have to.
Well, I'm going to do something different, so maybe Carter wants. I mean, I'm going to do like I have a feeling like 40% could be different, and so all right. So this album came out in like the early '90s. So those who are older nodding their heads. The younger ones are like, you know it? Okay, so you're old. No. Okay. So it's DC Talk and Jesus Freak, and I'm actually going to play just the intro so you can hear the song. I mean, just like the first verse. I thought this was just talking about black people at first, right? But then it's talking about the human race, right? I mean, at the very beginning, and then as I thought about, it, I was like, it's talking about all. Yeah. Come on in.
It would be funny because they're white, except one.
Oh, except one. Yeah. So, oops. Yeah. So I just played this song for those who are coming in. I'll just drag it over. I didn't, but I wanted you guys to see.
We are talking about reconciliation.
Yeah. Yes, biblical racial reconciliation. Like this is the band. Let's see, skip back just a little bit. Like there's so two white guys and a black guy. And when I say black and white, I'm not being prejudiced or anything. Just putting that out there. But I'll explain that in just a second. So the song, I mean, it's like twice as old as you guys, you girls. But it's still it's Christians talking about that we need to come together as the human race, as people, despite the color of our skin. Okay. Before I get to there, I just want to share a little bit about my family. Okay. So that's me with the hat. These two are my parents. That's my wife, my two kids, the two boys right here. Okay. Athanasius, also known as Thanos. Ignatius, also known as Nacho. Angelia, so it gets really confusing when we register. Angelia, Athanasius, Ignatius. The person's like, oh, how do you write any of these names? Mine's Ben. Thank you. All right. Karen, Carrie, my sisters. They just got married, and they got married like 9 years ago. And so these are their two kids. So they look kind of mixed, but a little more. I mean, to me, they look a little more white, but that's okay. Nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying, like when I look at them, and I have cousins also that are half, and they look white, like you can't even tell they're half, to the point where even the cousin forgot. Like one time, actually, she was in school. This is in near Portland, Oregon, and then the teacher's like, "We have like 5 minority students in here," and then my cousin, she's like, and the teacher's like, "It's you, Andrea Cheng," and I was like, "Oh, me, okay," because she even kind of forgot because it's just like, yeah, they don't really. It's my uncle, but then the only thing like they didn't know how to say, like, they don't speak Cantonese. And so really the world is just a white world. And it's okay, nothing wrong with it. But I share that because like, we're in America, okay? We're amongst white people. Although the whites won't be the majority group very long. In about 20 years, 10, 20 years, there'll be no majority people. That's something cool as well. But this is the mixing. And the funny thing is my sisters, because I married someone who is Chinese, this one at first, she's like, "You had to marry someone Chinese, didn't you?" And I'm like, it's not like I'm like I have to be Chinese, but just that's what happened. Okay, but I wasn't the one who was the pioneer to marry somebody of a different ethnic background. So she got mad at me for that. Okay. So theology, race, justice applied. As you go about your lives, even from a young age, think about how you can lean in and listen. Okay, active listening and learning with people that are like your peers, your friends. Okay, because they might share something, and sometimes it's just awkward, but just listen. And I learned this actually at Urbana back in 2015 or 16 or something, when the speaker said this, like, lean in and listen. And she said, "You know what? If you see someone who's black, tell them you see them. Give them a hug or something." And I was kind of like, why is she saying this? Okay, and part of it is because for blacks, like for Asians, I noticed we actually are happy that people don't see us. Like oh, I'm invisible. Okay, but blacks, because of the history, they want to be seen. They don't want to be ignored, right? So sometimes when you see someone, it's like just say hello. But of course, with Asians, if you say hello when they're walking down, at least in like San Francisco, they're just like, oh, why are you talking to me, right? Like that's so you have to engage people differently, okay? But for blacks, you want to lean in and listen because and then later on, they will actually then lean in and listen to what you have to say because that's how friendships work, right? That's how you become brother to another brother, sister to another sister, brother, sister. Okay, so it's active listening and learning, okay? Because we want to listen and say, how can I support this? And sometimes you lean in and listen and you go, oh, I actually still don't support it. That's okay. Okay, but you want to figure out otherwise, because I don't want to see you guys like protesting something that's not right. It's okay to protest, but be wise about it. But the idea is, how do we process the world around us and apply our theological beliefs to it, shaping our own unique hermeneutic or just our own theological thinking? Okay, so that's active listening and learning, because then we have to then engage the world. Okay, because what we believe, what you learn at church, right? That's your theology. But then you're going to take your theology and you have to say, does this theology make sense when I apply it? Maybe it doesn't. And so this is actually it should be like a circle with like arrows like this. So it's like you have the theory, you try to put into praxis, which is just think of practice, okay? But that's like the Greek word or Latin word. And then figure out, does it work or not? Bring it back to your theory, readjust your theory, and then try to put into practice again. Does that make sense? Theory and practice. You guys know what a theory is? Your hypothesis, is this going to work or not? And then it's like an experiment, kind of. Okay, all right. Yeah, so how do we interact even with global events, news, societal changes? Okay, because as I get older, and I live in San Francisco, so the city of San Francisco is in the news all the time. So I'm like, oh, okay, like what is there new now that I need to know and be aware of? But I don't think Lynchburg or Richmond, Virginia pops up too often in the news, but San Francisco quite a bit. That's where I'm living now. How can we engage with neighbors who differ from us in appearance, language, or lifestyle? Quick show of hands. Can you talk to everybody on your block? If you were just to go over and knock on the door and say, hi, I am, I don't know, Sarah, Lily, or whatever. Or do you think I have to use a different language?
You mean code switch, or do you mean a different language?
A completely different language. Like you have to learn a new language. Which code? Do you guys know about code switching? Not yet? Okay, well, I'll try to remember.
You have to use a different language.
Yes. So I can only talk to 2/3 of the people on my street because I tried it. And it was because I was preaching on who is my neighbor. I'm like, I actually don't know my neighbors. And so I just knocked on the doors and like writing names, like, hey, I just want to say hi, I'm a pastor. And of course, at first, when you like knock on the door opens, right? Like, who are you? Like, oh, I'm a neighbor. Oh, hi, right? And so it's like something about saying, I'm your neighbor. It's important. And then it's like, oh, I just live down the street. Just want to get to know, like, get your name, maybe phone number, maybe if you want to like share your license plate, then we know if like you see a car that's about to get towed or get a ticket, because that happens constantly. Then we can say, oh, okay, like, but more for me, it's just a name at the house number. But I can only talk to 2/3 because the Cantonese and Mandarin speakers I can speak to, the English I can speak to, but Spanish, no español. Okay, I only know like 10 Spanish words, like hola, hombre, amigo, hermano, like those words. And so for me, that's a tough one too, because I want to be able to be a neighbor to my neighbors. But how do you engage with the world? And maybe you might have to learn another language in order to engage with some more of your neighbors. Unity among fellow Christians, which is the love of Christ. Okay, so when we look at one another, sometimes it's easy to go, okay, somebody is Chinese or somebody's Asian, and so we will flock together. Even for myself, my wife and I, we went to my seminary alumni event, a dinner, and I told my wife, we're going to talk to the Asians. We know that. Let's go talk to people who are not Asian, okay? And this is a seminary alumni event. Everyone's a Christian here. So we should be able to just go, hey, how's it going? No, it was so hard. I walk up to why are they talking to us? And so finally, I think it was it was a woman, maybe Filipino or maybe Thai, or I can't remember. But she was at the table. I was like, oh yeah, come sit down. We just chatted a little bit. And at the end, sure enough, we're trading Facebook info with other Chinese and Koreans. And so it's just like interesting. I mean, I kind of did my own little theory and put it to the test, and I was right. It didn't. The Asians will flock together without too much difficulty. But why is there not unity? More unity amongst us, okay? Because what if our neighbors are fellow Christians like us? Maybe they are, and you don't know, right? Knock on the door, find out, just say hi. Another pastor, he was saying how that's what they did. They're like, what if you just bake some cookies, went over to your neighbor and said, we've lived here for 10 years, we know you have, but we just never did anything to just say hi. So we baked some cookies. And he's like, you know what they will not say? They won't say, I don't want your cookies. They're going to say, oh, yeah, we should have done that too. Yeah, but thank you for the cookies. Like, let's hang out. That's probably what people are going to say, right? Your neighbor, unless it's a really grumpy neighbor. But I mean, you can kind of tell if you've lived for 10 years how your neighbor is. Okay, so you don't know. But and then the other idea is foster unity. Okay, so that's what we have. Some of us pastors, we've tried to foster unity, not just amongst other Chinese, but other churches of different ethnic backgrounds. So here's another question that I heard around the time of COVID and Black Lives Matter. Is I asked my friend right here, Port Wilburn. Carter knows him. Okay, he and his wife were actually my wife and my mentors. I know it seems kind of weird. Shouldn't they be Chinese? But it's okay. And so this is actually us. Well, let me just jump back. Okay, so what do you hear when a black man says, I'm tired? I'm tired. Throw out answers. I need answers.
Systemic oppression.
Well, can you define systemic oppression more for some who, in other words?
Our criminal justice system is disproportionately filled with people who are black. People in poor areas, disproportionately black, worse off education-wise. All the negative statistics are tilted towards African Americans. So a lot of it has to do with the very conservative environment. It's it's all the culture. That's how your culture was. But a lot of it is poverty based, and that poverty is a historic thing that came from slavery, etc.
Right.
So there's a lot of compounding factors, but overall they have gone through a lot, and they're continuing to go through a lot. But if you talk to every white conservative person, they're like, maybe it's real. Every black person will pretty much agree that this is something that they know or go through.
It's just being tired, because it for them it harkens back to the time of slavery. That's why blacks, and I say blacks and not African Americans, because I did ask, because I grew up kind of like this, where I'm the minority. I'm the one of 5 Asians at school, right, or in my grade, and then I was taught by the Caucasian teacher, you're supposed to say Caucasian American and you're supposed to say African American. And then I asked the pastor, okay, so I'm here black sometimes, is it black or is it African American? And then he said, it's black. I'm black. I'm like, oh, okay, so you're black. Got it. Okay, but then I'm like, okay, depending on the group I'm in, if I say black, I sound like I'm racist. Okay, but I'm not. So sometimes I have to preface it okay, no, somebody told me. And the funny thing about this pastor is that he is black, but he's a lighter skinned black. So even amongst blacks, they ostracize him, because he ran home one day and said, Mommy, the kids at school, they said, I'm white. Am I white? I don't get it. It's oh, honey, you're butterscotch. Okay, and then, because he's a lighter complexion of black. But then he told us that later on, when his kids went to school, the kids did the same thing to him. And so he had to them. And so he had to go tell his kids, you're butterscotch. But I'm kind of thinking, why didn't you just tell them that this might happen? You're butterscotch, so just get ready for it. But he did it. But that's, so even amongst blacks, there can be looking up at, looking down at, just like in Chinese culture, sometimes we can do that too. Are you blue collar? Are you white collar? Did you just immigrate? Do you have a thick accent or whatever? We can do that too. Okay, so we need to be cautious. Okay, but going back to blacks, when they say I'm tired, it is that being seen as someone who is inferior. let me just jump to here real quick. So for Port, okay, so he's our he's like a pastor to the pastors in the churches in our area, and I've even asked him too, have you been pulled over by a police officer or mistreated by police? I was like, yeah, like what did you do? Just you have to be very polite, and it's different. And this is funny because we're on the plane, we're going to Atlanta. There's actually another black lady sitting right in front of us, like right here, and she kept looking at us, and because we're chatting, and she says, "Do you two know each other?" It's like, yeah. It's like, oh, okay. But she thought it was weird that an Asian guy and a black guy were friends. And it was like, but we expanded her mind. Okay, so that's also what we're, as Chinese, that's what I think we are also called to do, to help expand and break cultural barriers. Okay, so yeah, so he was the one doing like BLM stuff, Black Lives Matter, COVID, all that. When I'm trying to ask questions like, are we like, I'm Chinese. I want to understand the viewpoint. How do I understand it so I can tell my Chinese church? Do we put a black square on our profile page on Facebook or not? I don't know. Explain it to me. And then as I talked to more, like I sobbed and I cried when I heard the stories, because these are not slavery stories. These are like within the last decade stories. Okay, and then later on we ended up going. COVID, Black Lives Matter. I'll skip that. Okay, but let me then go back. So actually here. So during COVID, we actually, some of us pastors, because I was asking the question, we got onto Zoom because there was nothing else to do but go onto Zoom. And we're trying to ask, about the stuff. And then so I talked to Dr. Earl Crawford right here. He brought me in. He's the one who actually, no, it wasn't him. It was the bishop down here. And then he posed a question: what does it mean to sit when you hear a black man say, "I'm tired"? But thankfully, Port told me, so then I just had to keep my lips shut. And then all the other white pastors kind of gave out these white answers, like not ignorant answers as to what it meant, right? Not an ignorant bad way, just didn't know. Okay, and then like the next month, we explained how the black pastor said, you know what also hurts is when we only hear from you in January. Because what's in February? Which history month is February? Black History Month. So they call them in January saying, hey, can you come speak in our church to address Black History Month? And then I don't hear from you again. So then now it feels like, I'm just being used once a year to talk about Black history. And then so more tears, more crying. In the end of all this, we actually called each other my brother. I love you, my brother. We would sign off saying, I love you, my brother. Okay. And so we actually even had a chance to talk because one of the pastors actually knows this guy named John Perkins right here, who wrote this book, One Blood. So part of the way, after a few, maybe like 2 months or so, Pastor Doug Tegner right here, he's like, we should read this book. And then we're like, okay. So we all read the book together. I'm like, this book is amazing because it's telling, because I was like, I'm an American. I've lived in America most of my life, but I did not know this about a group of people, a culture, a Black culture that's so close to me and yet so far because I'm here, but it's almost like what's going on is invisible. Like we see some of it. We see like in TV shows, right? We see the Cosby Show or something where they're trying to encourage their people. Like let's do certain, let's not think so lowly. Like we can be doctors, we can be lawyers, we can be all these things. That encouragement. I forget what I was going on with that. But this book, going back to this book, it explains some of like the systemic oppression.
He worked with Martin Luther King, right?
Yeah, so he did. So he worked with the civil rights movement and also with John. I'm blanking on it. John Lewis, okay, who also passed away like 3 years ago. And so, yeah, they worked with Martin Luther King. His story, if you read this book, he talks about how his brother fought black. He's black. Brother fought in World War II, didn't die, comes back to the U.S., dies by a white police officer, getting shot by a white police officer. His story himself, he was confused because he was beaten up by a group of white guys. Okay? Then in the hospital, it's a bunch of Christians and doctors and nurses who are white. And he's like, I'm confused. White people beat me up, and now white people are treating me so gently. huh? I mean, if you think about it, like Chinese, we have that same story from other people who are like aunties and uncles who will say, the white people come to Hong Kong. What do? They have missionaries, and there's also the guys that are selling opium, right? So it's almost the same scenario. Like, I don't know what to make of these white people. And not all white people are the same, but it's just like, but from one person's perspective, all you see is that the skin is different, and they're offering us these two things. And opium and Jesus loves you. What's going on, right? Mixed messaging. So that's like what he experienced, but then he became a believer. He's been pushing for civil rights, and so we got to have a little Zoom call with him. And then we leaned in and we listened and we learned. I didn't talk about this in yesterday. So this Pastor Abraham Michael, he's actually from Egypt. So that means, which continent is he from? Africa, right? So he's actually an African American, right? Because a lot of African Americans, their ancestry goes back maybe 8 generations, but they don't really know, or even further, but they don't really know where they're from, perhaps. But he's real African American, but yet people look at him like, you're African American? Like, I'm from Egypt, and yes, I'm African American. So it's like, even the definition sometimes, it's not accurate anymore. And so it makes more sense. Yeah, call up some black. Let me jump back to that other quote that I did right here. Okay, so this is also in the book. And it says, when I saw you from afar, I thought you were a monster. When you got closer, I thought you were just an animal. When you got even closer, I saw that you were a human. But when we were face to face, I realized you were my brother. So it's only when we come close, when we can hear somebody and listen to them and see them face to face, oh, you are my brother. I need to care for you. You're not a monster, but if I don't really look at you clearly, then you could be a stranger, right? You're just a human. A way we can even think about it is sometimes we may have a friend, okay? And let's say my friend's name is John. He's white, okay? And then later on, another friend comes over, and his name is Steve. All right. And then what can happen is my mom will ask, how is John doing? It's like, Mom, that's not John. That's Steve. How come you can't tell white people apart, right? But here's the thing. I'm pretty sure it happens to everyone. The girls probably have their female friends, and then 2 different girls come at different times, and mom or dad gets the kid mixed up. Why? Because sometimes we're not really we don't look at people close enough to really discern the difference. It's not that our parents don't care. It's just that somehow they didn't look clear. Or that happens. Even for myself, I got who is it? The guy Lando Calrissian mixed up with the black boxer in Rocky. Okay, they're both black guys with mustaches, and I thought they were the same guy until recently. Okay, because I wasn't really looking at the detail, or I can blame it on the poor quality of TVs back then. Okay, but are we really looking at people to really understand? It's not like, let's look for all their pimples and everything, but really understand who the person is. Okay, and then that way I can say, you are my brother, and I love you. Okay? Okay, let's go. Okay, this statement is true. This is from Paul. He wrote to the Galatians, there is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is neither male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Okay, this doesn't mean that Jesus doesn't see the uniqueness and difference in us and in our ethnic backgrounds and in our cultural backgrounds. It's just that he loves all of us, each individual person, equally. Okay, not as the world constructed it, not as when you hear I'm tired, because they're hearkening back to even slave times when a black man wasn't valued to a white man, right? Have the younger kids heard about that? How a black man, what percentage are they of a white man? 3/5. So how do you get? And so that means if they wanted to vote on something, you would need 2 black men's votes to outvote 1 white man's vote. That's how racism was done back then, because 3/5 plus 3/5. Quick, what is it? 6/5, right? 6/5. So now it's just 20% more than. So basically, yeah, 2 to 1, but a little more, right? So you needed 2 black people's votes to outvote 1. Is that fair? No. Okay, so that's that's some of the stuff that gets brought up. Like, that's why they're tired. Like, why do I keep being belittled? Even during BLM Port, okay, he posted, he shared a post on Facebook, and another girl that I knew from Seattle, okay, she moved down to New Orleans, and Port is in the Bay Area. All right, they shared this. I'm like, the only reason why I'm seeing this is the two black people that I know happen to like the same post. They don't know one another, because sometimes you get posts sent to you because it's like our two friends who are at church, right? They share, or they like the thing, you get it. This was two people who don't know each other. I was like, why did I get this post? And then I was like, because this is a post that probably circles around black people the way like Asian posts circle around, right? Like I was like, even for COVID, I thought it was funny in the Bay Area where we panic shopped 2 weeks earlier than all our white friends. And then we see posts on Facebook where, quick, buy up everything. And from our white friends, I'm like, we did that earlier. Like, did you not get the memo? How come you didn't get the memo? Oh, you guys are not in the Chinese information circles that Facebook created. You're in the white circles that Facebook created, so you didn't hear. And so it's like, oh, that's so interesting the way the world works. And so it made me think more. And the girl also posted on her Facebook, black men, I love you. Okay, you are loved. And at first I'm like, what is this talking? Is she talking like, I was like, is she the prostitute from John 4 where she had like multiple husbands? Like, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. But I'm just trying to like, so I had to like lean in, listen, like process, like what is she saying? What is she saying? And then it finally dawned on me. She's again trying to uplift black men who feel I'm tired of not being valued as equal, as a human being. Okay, so that's what it comes for. So that's why this is a very important verse for us to understand. Okay, we're all one in Christ Jesus. You should read this at some point. It's actually a letter, okay, but it's not very long. Okay, you could spend more time doing your homework than reading this. Okay, but it talks about how he's like, what is justice? I'm imprisoned. I've been arrested, thrown in prison for something like that wasn't illegal. But now you got to say, oh, good job, police officers, because you did your due diligence of arresting people, but I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, let me see, what's next? Frederick Douglass, another person that I see as one of our ancestors, even though he's not Chinese, right? But he is part of our, yeah, okay. Are you all American citizens? Hopefully, or probably almost all are, right? So then, this is, in a way, our history. This is the land that we live in, okay? Don't ignore, oh, he's black, I don't have to care about him, okay? He also had to push for rights, because if he didn't push it, who knows what the rights might look like for us, okay? So the reason why he looks like that, the reason why he's not smiling, besides the fact that maybe in that time people didn't smile, but they said that the reason why he did that was because he was trying to fight for the abolition of slavery, okay? And he even wrote a speech that he presented before the president, in which it was titled, what to the black man is July 4th? Okay, so what do you guys do for July 4th? What does everyone do? Snow cones, fireworks, cookout. Okay, so Dr. Earl, earlier, he told me that when he was a kid, on July 4th, he would see the fireworks going off. And he's like, oh, I want to go out. And his grandparents like, get in here. You're not going out. Why? It wasn't their day of freedom. Now we're honoring it, right? In the U.S. in like 3 weeks, right? Juneteenth. Now, of course, I kind of confused one other black pastor because I was like, okay, I know it's this Juneteenth back in 2021 or 2020. Like, okay, Juneteenth, okay. Am I supposed to celebrate it with you? I'm confused, okay, because I'm not black. And so I asked him that, and so he actually is like pondering at one point to where even his wife saw him sitting on the couch. Like, what do you think about? Ben asked me this question, and I'm stumped by it too. Okay, but listen to it. Listen to his autobiography. He was a very shrewd man. His speech makes my speeches look like garbage. Okay, and the way he learned it to read, he was like, if I go to this white boy, and ask him, can you teach me to read? He's gonna say, no, you can't, because you're a black slave. So he's like, what do I do? Oh, I know. Hey, I bet you can't read this right here. And the white boy went, oh, I can read it, I'll show you. And so as the white boy is reading the words, that he's looking at, oh, that's how you read that word. Okay, that's how you pronounce it. And that's how he learned to read, through his own shrewdness. Okay, so that's just an amazing figure in our history. Okay, this is we'll quickly go through it a little more. This author, he became a professor over at Fuller Seminary. My dad even got to learn under him. And his story was that when he was going through the South, he would be leading praise music and worshiping God. But then as the sun started to go down, then his friends were like, okay, quick, get in the car. We need to take you somewhere else because you're not supposed to be out at night because you're black. And he's like, this is so weird. So that's why he wrote this book, and he titled it My Friend, the Enemy. Because are these really my friends in which they're not going to speak against racism, right? Because you look just like the enemy if I didn't know any better, right? So there's that. And there is justice in the Bible, okay? God calls for it. Micah the prophet, he has said, he has told you, oh man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. You see that the word justice is here. God wants justice. And that is why there are times when we do need to speak up. We do need to get on the bus and sit there and say, yeah, I'm going to protest, okay? It's not a Chinese thing to protest usually. I mean, and if it does, like Tiananmen Square, it gets squashed down and then nobody knows about it in China. Because that's what happened. I asked my friend from China, and he's like, what are you talking about? Right? They don't know it because of censorship. I think Carter's going to tell me. Okay, good. I'm at the halfway point. Okay. Because as I said all this stuff, black, yeah, I had to make sure I got here so I knew where. Because when I was reading this book, after us pastors read it, we said we need to give this to our churches to read. Because it's not just, this is information that shouldn't be just hidden and undisclosed. We want to make sure our church members can do it. So, and then of course, this 2020 COVID. So he said, what if we had our church members read it and discussed it? And I was like, yes, but let's do it where we create breakout rooms and we take our church members and mix them up into each breakout room so that you would have at most two people from each church in a breakout room. That way, then you could get more conversation and more diversity. Otherwise, we're just like, I don't know what this is talking about. If it's all from the same church, right? I guess it's talking about this. I'm not sure. But when we're all in the same room, mixed people, then we can say, here's my experience. Here's my experience, right? And then they can hear from different angles. So at the end of each one of these 10-week series, or when we go through all nine or 10 chapters, at the end, what was really encouraging is we would hear, like somebody who's white, I never had a Chinese Christian friend. Or a black person, I never had an Asian Christian friend, but now I do. And it was great to see them be so encouraged and say, yeah, this is great. So we are wrapping up what History Month now? It's not Black History Month, it's not February. Yeah, the Asian History Month, right? Or API History Month. Okay. So I bring that up because this book, as we were going through it and we were planning, which pastor is going to address which chapter? I said, as an Asian person, I need to come in by week 3 to address things from an Asian perspective, because this book only talks about black and white. And when I was reading it, I'm like, what does this have to do with me? Can I just exit out of the Zoom meeting and then just the blacks and white just figure out their problem? Because I was like, if it doesn't have anything to do with me, I'll go. But I feel like there is, so I'm going to stay. And then I'm like, I think I just have to sit, sometimes speak up, but maybe there will be a time when I can bring up the Asian stuff. So so this was actually posted during BLM, okay, and it says, destroy racism, be like a panda. I'm black, white, and Asian. Okay, although it's really from China, pandas are from China, but it's okay, we'll accept our other Asian brothers and sisters. Okay, and because it's, for me, what this says is that sometimes as Asians, we can identify with those who are white. Okay, at other times, we can identify with those who are black because we are a minority. But other times, we are seen as, did I say it already, the white adjacent? That's a somewhat new term that I heard just this past year. We are white adjacent as Asians, okay, because we are very similar in many ways to white culture. People say, oh, you've assimilated. Well, no, it's not really assimilated. Many of the cultural norms are similar. And in fact, they're sometimes even higher to the point where I don't think the kids know this, but during, I think, maybe 2021, a study came out or expose about Harvard and how the applicants, there was a grading system in which they would give Asians like negative 40 points right off the bat. You mark off Asian, negative 40 points. If you're white, no difference. If you were brown, like Latino, Hispanic, you got like positive 40 points or 30 points or something, 30, 40 points. And if you're black, plus 50 points. That was affirmative action working, but now it's against us, even though we're minorities, right? So isn't it interesting, a minority, like sometimes we're here, sometimes we're there, sometimes we're beyond, right? But then you think about it, why did Harvard have to do this? Why did Harvard have to do this? Too many Asians applying, where if they didn't put that extra negative 40, 50 points, Harvard would be full of Asians, like UCLA and Irvine. So they had to do it, but it's like, because they also want to make sure that their student body was diverse. Otherwise, then people would say, oh, Harvard's racist. They only let Asians in. It's like, well, no, it's a merit-based system. Okay, so we have to kind of adjust it. So they're kind of in a bind about what they do, right? But it's also that first, that seems kind of racist. But then think about it more. Have you heard the saying, black don't crack?
Yeah.
Have you heard the Asian one?
Asian don't
raisin. Okay.
Amen.
So it's talking about, because blacks, they like to put on lots of lotion. I didn't know that, but they put lots of lotion so they don't get ashy. Yes. Okay, and then for us, like lots of moms, especially the Korean ladies, right? They have all those creams that they put on their faces. They have the Darth Vader visors and stuff so that they don't get wrinkles and stuff like that. Okay, so that's where. And I didn't first a black person told me this, so I told to another black person, and then I did that second black person. Did you know that one? I didn't know that, but that's kind of funny. But there's a negative to it that I've also discovered, is that because I look younger than I actually am, then people also treat me with a little less respect than I believe I should deserve as an Asian person. And I think you've seen that cartoon of the mom that ages. There's one where it's a girl. The next one, then it's a girl with two little kids. Okay, and then the mom doesn't change. So she's like 20, 30, 40, and then all of a sudden, boom, menopause. And then over here, 120 years old, and she's looking up like that, right? And so it's just saying like how we don't look like we age until like we just stop aging almost. I have gone this way, but and then my hair has thinned, but still people, it's like, girls, how old do you think I am? Oh, not quite, but okay. Or did anybody else think younger? I'm not asking for 20. I'm 43, okay, but some people, white people will go, what? And sometimes it's because our kids are young, because I got married when I was 33 and we had them at 34. And my wife loves it because she's older than me. But they're like, are you 29? Oh, thank you, stop it. Okay, but it's just like, but yeah. So anyway, so that happens, and so that's another bias that we have to be careful of ourselves, because sometimes we can look at people differently because they're older or younger. So we have to be careful. Now, what are you? Okay, what are we? We are peacemakers. You are a peacemaker because you are Asian in America. I believe that's what we have been, in a way, because of that whole panda thing. Okay, you are to be an example to others. I sometimes even tell the kids at my church, at my old church, like, you are setting an example for others to see because you are Chinese, okay, in an area where there might be lots of white people. Okay, so do you want to set forth a good example for them in their minds? Like, oh, yeah, Chinese, they're not littering or anything. Not that you do, right? But like, what kind of image are we setting for others? Because that's what they're going to leave with, right? If we're doing naughty things, they're going to say, oh, I saw this Asian do something, bad, and so I think all Asians are bad, or do this kind of thing. We create negative stereotypes. So, what are we doing? Okay, and you can do great things for Jesus as an Asian Chinese American. Okay, don't think that because you're Asian and the majority population around you is white, that therefore you can't do that. You may need to speak up, just like you could be some sort of, you're not gonna be, I don't know, maybe, but some sort of like civil rights leader or something to just speak up about issues, or maybe just amongst your friends. Did you know that there was a Chinese Exclusionist Act in 1882? Okay, and what happened even around there? Did you think, or not, it wasn't just an Exclusionist Act. it was actually Chinese were also lynched and murdered. I talked to another pastor just recently, south of me, over in what's it called? South of Pacifica. But he was saying how he knew that 100 years ago, there were Chinese that moved in, okay, and they had like a laundromat and maybe like a restaurant or something. And then one day, one day, it burned to the ground. And the next day, the Chinese were gone. And he was like, he felt so sad. And I don't know if he talks to many Chinese, but when he was talking to me, I could tell that he was like, that was a grave wrong that shouldn't have happened, because there's still not pretty much no Chinese living in that area of the Bay Area. Okay, but this happened back in 1882. Okay, and a little bit about San Francisco. Okay, is that during that Chinese Exclusionist Act, there was a plan to actually burn down Chinatown in San Francisco. Okay, because there was that racism there, like, okay, these Chinese rats with the rat tails and blah, 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 like we have to kill them, burn it down so that they'll run away. And so our ancestors were smart enough to put these kind of roofs on top. Okay, and then other leaders in San Francisco, oh, we can't burn down Chinatown. Those are historical. Those are like the rooftops in China, so therefore we can't burn it down. So very shrewd, Chinatown didn't get burned down. All right. So that's just some of the stuff that Chinese have experienced. It's not just the railroads. There's been many different ways in which we have been persecuted against. This is Baldwin. What's the last name? Baldwin Lee Chan Lam. Okay. We met him at a conference last year. He and his wife and his daughter. And Baldwin's story is pretty cool. Starts off sad, but it ends up really good. Is he grew up never knowing his grandfather. He asked his dad. His dad would never talk about it, because his dad didn't know that his dad was working in Mississippi but passed away. Okay, and the letters where he said, "Oh, I want to see my son. I miss him." He never got to see them until later in life. But he was like, "Hey, Dad, I want to find out more about our history. Let's just fly to Mississippi, and then we'll drive around. We'll see if there's a cemetery. We'll try to find our last name somewhere on a gravestone." That's all they thought they would find. They land. Then they end up going to a university there that had a Chinese historical museum. And they go in and they find his grandfather's Bible in there and some other stuff, like the till for the cashier from the store. And then as they keep looking through, they find other people. He ends up meeting the mayor of this town, which was the first all ex-slave town. And then as they tell him more stories, he's like, the mayor says, "I'm so thankful for you." And then Baldwin's like, "What are you talking about? I'm so thankful for you because you've told me so much about my history." And then he's like, no, you don't understand. It's because of the Chinese that were in our town that the town exists today. He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "During the Depression, it was the Chinese who had the stores that when the blacks, they didn't have any money, then they would say, 'Oh, I need food.' And then the Chinese like, 'You know what? Okay, just take it. We'll give you credit. Pay us back when you get money.'" I was like, good job, Chinese, good job, right? The other story out of many stories was that similar thing happened where the blacks were looking to have a worship service, and they're looking for church. They went to the white church. White church said, "Mm-mm." They went to the Chinese, said, "Can we use your church?" And the Chinese said, "Yes, come on in." All right, and so it's like, yes, good job. Because even back then, like, yeah, we understood, love one another as fellow brothers and sisters, as Christians. And so like that, yeah, that makes me tear up, because it's like, they're setting such a good example, as fellow minorities. All right. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh, let me do this video real quick though, because so then you can kind of hear. Let's see. Tell me. Oh no, I can't show you the slide, the video. I mean, you have to listen to the video. Where did the mouse go? I just had it. There we go.
Started out in the 1930s as two different buildings across the street from each other. One serving black people, the other serving white people. Neither black nor white.
Now listen,
the Chinese community found
just a second.
themselves in the middle.
It was like a 3-lane road. There were the whites and the blacks and the
That's her voice.
Chinese. We all stayed in our lanes.
The first 2 times I heard that, I would close my eyes. open my eyes, close my
The
eyes.
Chinese
Like
grocers
that
depend
voice
on the Black community for business.
is her voice. Chinese have been here a long time in America. We just think it's only been 2 generations because we're probably the 2nd generation in our family in the US. But she's one of the people that her family was the store owners. And the funny thing is they were store owners and they weren't even trying to create a monopoly. But what happened was she was describing the street. And in some towns, there's a white side of the street, there's a black side of the street. So if you're white, you're on that side. You don't cross over to this side. If you're black, you're on this side. You don't go over to that side. And there are stories of where like somebody will walk in and it's like, I need some salt. Okay. And then you look around like, oh, there's no salt over here. Let me go over to the store over there and I'll grab the salt. And then you walk across, grab the salt. Okay, here you go. Because they were the only store in town because they were getting all the food to sell it. But then they had to create 2 stores to just sell all the same stuff. Okay, it was that divided back then. And then I did share this yesterday. Has anybody heard of a laughing barrel?
Laughing barrel?
An LOL barrel. So, if you can, any guesses on what it might be?
Is that the girl where you turn upside down and laughs at you?
Good guess, but no. That's a very optimistic guess. Okay. Yeah, like that. No. It was improper for a black man to laugh out loud. So if Carter told me a joke and I'm black and I wanted to laugh, I had to look for the barrel, shove my head in there, and then laugh. Okay, so these are stories that I heard from the pastors that I gathered with who were black. Right? And then they saw lynchings. I think they might have said Virginia or North Carolina or South Carolina, but like their families were, an uncle saw a lynching and said, we're getting out of here. We're going to Texas. We're going to other states, to California. Right? So there were those things. I'm not upset at anybody, anybody who's white or anything, but like that's some of we bring it up not to condemn. Okay? We bring it up to say this is history that we need to know so we know what not to do. It's almost like Jews saying like Nazism and that type of racism is wrong. Okay, but it's not because I don't think any Jew likes to talk about Adolf Hitler, but it's like they need to because they're a constantly persecuted group more than us. All right, so let me hide that. Yeah. So check out this series, and I'll have a link that you can also look at later. With a bunch of stuff. So after BLM, then in 2021, that was my time to also speak out. This is Francis Chan with a mask in San Francisco City Hall, and he's speaking about how we as Asians, we need to speak up because there are these crimes that are happening against us, and it needs to stop. Okay, and so I attended this professor. He's at SF State, San Francisco State University. His name is Russell Jung. And he said something that I still remember. He said that we as Asians are perpetual foreigners in our own home. Because when people look at us, they're going to potentially assume we're from another country. I described how that lady in seminary did that. Even last year at the church I'm at now, which is a multi-ethnic church, but an older white lady, she goes, oh, you spoke very well during the announcements. Where did you learn your English? And again, it's like, I'm born in the US, and so I learned it, going to school in America, right? And it's just like, okay, but see, when I talk to people who are black, they would think, oh, you should get upset. It's like, no, I need to be gracious. If she has only engaged with Chinese who do have broken English, perhaps, I'm now, again, expanding her mind, okay? So instead of being upset, we just help her to see there are those of us who do speak, proper, clear, better English than some of them. All right. Anyways, yeah. So we are forever foreigners. I even have a mentor who said he grew up in Iowa, okay, Chinese, and he's like, all the whites are telling him, yeah, you're Chinese, you're not American. And then he ended up working for Goldman Sachs, and well, you're Chinese, go to Hong Kong and work for us. So he goes to Hong Kong. Then all the people in Hong Kong you're American, you're not Chinese. It's like, I'm not either. Why is it everywhere I go, I'm not the people that I'm in? I'm not the people. We are perpetual foreigners, okay? But don't think of it as a curse. Think of it as something in which we can be better at understanding others, okay? Because we are stuck in that bicultural, and in a way, our parents who are first generation, they are too, okay? Now this is a QR code if you want. I put in a whole bunch of different videos. Some are funny, some are sad, and I do have it loaded somewhere. So I can just kind of show you some of the content, but I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Okay. So there have been studies and videos talking about, let's see, let's maximize. Don't go there. Ah. Okay, I'll just drag it as far as I can. Yeah, that's better. Okay. All right, so like at one point during BLM, that was my profile pic. I wanted to say, no, I love you, because of that black girl who said, black men, we love you. I want to show, yeah, I'm with you, okay? And then I would put, I'm with you, I love you, I get you. There's different videos explaining about how there's different racism. And sometimes racism can be as simple as just Jane Elliott put this experiment of blue eyes and brown eyes, and how just by the color of the eyes, we could actually create two different groups and then look down at the brown eyes because we have blue eyes. Right? Just from that, we can do that. It's scary. And she was even on Oprah, although I'm not a fan of Oprah, but she explained it, and it did, and you could see like some people didn't get it. This guy, Daryl Davis, he was a musician, and then what happened was somehow there was a miscommunication, and so a KKK grand whatever master wanted to talk to him. He's like, I'm black. Like, why does this KKK guy want to talk to me? So he tells his agent, let's see what happens. Let's set up a meeting. And so they set up a meeting, and at one point, the scary thing was they're in this hotel room, okay, and the KKK guy has a bodyguard with him, okay? Daryl Davis just has his assistant with him, and all of a sudden they're sitting there, it's really tense. I was like, ka-ching! And then it's like, what was that? Like the bodyguard's like, he's reaching for his gun, and everybody's like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, his agent's like, oh, that was the ice that just melted, and so like the bottle of like soda had fallen, but there was a ton of tension there. But what Daryl Davis did was he befriended the KKK Grand Ku Klux Dragon whatever guy, and he would actually go to rallies. Okay, but he didn't go yeah and put on a KKK outfit. Okay, he would sit there and he would watch, and that's all he did. He would watch them burn the cross. He would watch them do all these weird rituals and stuff. But because he was able to be with that grandmaster and show him, I'm not that monster you're thinking of that you're seeing from afar. At the very end, the grandmaster said, you know what? This is my outfit that I wore as the grandmaster. You can have it. Okay? I don't fear you anymore, or you're my friend. And then he opened this wardrobe, and he had multiple ones. But that's what sometimes it has to take, is you need to be there, show them you're not going to scare them, you're not harmful, and all that. Let's see. Listening, empathy. There's the videos right here. Understanding each other. Like that was funny with Jackie Chan talking to him, because Jackie Chan's English is thick Cantonese. So there's a lot of different stuff to kind of listen. Oh, another person you got to listen to, Thomas Sowell. But let me continue on because I'm.
History of people who've come to Chinatown in hopes of a better life in America.
Wrong video. There we go. Okay. Something else you can do is, because often we watch. Let me do it this way. Often we watch Fresh Off the Boat, right? You guys seen it? Yes. Okay. Have you guys seen Kim's Convenience? Yeah. Okay. This one's a little bit more mature. Okay, so the younger kids, maybe watch it with your parents or wait till you're older. But the other funny thing I wanted to point out is the casting. Hollywood has not fully understood that when we look at it, we see things a little differently. One of these people is not like the other, even though they look the same. Who's not the same? Anyone?
The Korean guy.
The dad is Korean. The rest of them are Chinese. On this side, one of these things is not like the other. The Chinese guy, Simu Liu, okay, Shang-Chi dude. Okay, the rest of them are Korean. All right, and I remember this one. So he came to church one time in Seattle because his aunt went to our church. And my friend goes up to like, you're Chinese, right? Like, yeah. why are you playing a Korean character on Star Trek Voyager? It's like, I got the job, and so I'm just gonna play it, right? Like that's what happens because Hollywood just needs an Asian actor that looks the part that they want. Okay, but what I want to say is we should also be looking at other TV shows to kind of understand Black culture. So that's why my wife and I we watch Blackish because we want like as we watch it, oh, I get it. Although Family Reunion, I just discovered like 4 months ago, and it's on Netflix, and it's less crude. I mean, not less crude, like less vulgar. Okay, and most of the content in there, it also it's a cool story because the dad, the story is he's an ex-Seahawks player, but they wanted to make it so he's a player in an area that's predominantly white, but he raises his Black family there, but he didn't explain to them any Black culture. So then they moved to like Columbus, Ohio or somewhere. And then now all the Blacks that are there who do know about civil rights and all the oppressions, explaining it to his children, where their children are like, we're Black. It's like, oh, but I didn't know this about, like the bus boycotts or anything like that. And so it's kind of fun to watch that one. Watch historical movies also. Like this is, the intro is so powerful. So it describes like these girls just at church, running up the stairs. Boom. That was the power of racism, blowing up a church in which little girls are in. That was the hatred that was there. It's not there, I mean, and it's much, I mean, yes, it's a different world, but it's a reminder of just the racism that was prevalent. Raised for, and there's many movies, but I'm just giving you a few examples. There's the Joy Luck Club that was based in San Francisco. There's a PBS series, mini-series. This one, yeah, there's so many things where my jaw dropped. I'm like, I'm Asian American. Oh, I did not know any of this stuff. The funny one is this Chinese actress, okay, back in when everything was black and white, she's like during Charlie Chaplin's era, okay? She would die in every movie she was in. She could be an evil person, she could be a good person. They would find a way to kill her off. Somebody like, bow and arrow, poison. They said one movie, she just all of a sudden just falls and dies. And it was just like, what is going on? And I think Hollywood just didn't know what to do with an Asian actress. And they thought, well, okay, we'll just kill her off. And that's what they, yeah. Rose faces. Yeah. And so when you watch, like, what is this? And then and then the other one was they're talking about an Indian man married a Black woman. The Indian man has a darker complexion than his Black wife, okay? But according to his documents, he's from the Aryan area of India. So he's actually white while his wife is Black, even though he's darker. So that was one where it was just like, this is so confusing. And it's like, so is it even color? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. This one was really fun. This was at the De Young Museum in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. My sons are right there. They're free day. They said, okay, like you can bring your kids in, do some art stuff, draw something that you see. So that's what they're doing. And about 10, 12 years before, I had gone through the museum, and I stopped at the scene of the San Francisco Railroad station that was painted with oil in 1874. When I first saw it, I looked at it, and I stood here, and I was kind of like, huh, that's interesting. Okay, I should go. Something caused me to stop. And I said, I need to look at it. And it told me I need to look at it again longer. And I'm like, but what is it? I mean, it's such a stagecoach, right? And then I guess it's a slightly funny scene. I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay, so the lady right here is seeing that her suitcase broke, the clothes are falling out. Is that what I'm supposed to be just staring at in this picture? I looked around, I kept looking around, like, why is this picture here? And it's not, there's nothing even described in this. It's just, I mean, nothing is described about what I'm going to tell you. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in to the right side. Okay, do you see anything here? Do you see perhaps yourself in this picture? I'll zoom in just a little more. That's us, 1874. a Chinese man, a coolie or something, who's like carrying stuff on a stick with 2 buckets. Okay, maybe he's carrying laundry, don't know, fish, I don't know, some food. And then on the other side, a little easier to see because he's all by himself, but I'll still help you see it. There's a black man. And I was like, this is interesting because this German painter is painting, but he went into enough detail to help us see in the future. It was still somewhat mixed. We're in the background. Because he could have just ignored anybody else, just made it all white, but he still wanted to be more historical. Also, there they talked about how like this man, he was he was an abolitionist, and they actually like hit him on the head, still took him to court in a stretcher, and then tried him and then killed him. It's like that's some of the racism from the past.
John Brown, he kind of led like a
Yeah. Oh yeah. He let
he's very interesting because in history, like you can see him as like kind of this guy who like murdered a bunch of white people, or you can see him as like a hero.
Mm-hmm.
Because he very early on was like the only way that racism is going to end in this country is if there's some kind of violence.
Like Malcolm X.
Right. So, but he was accurate because right after that happened, the Civil War happened, and he like wrote letters to Frederick Douglass. He's like, "Hey, you want to get in on this? Harriet Tubman, you want to get in on this?"
Right. Right. So I'm not advocating violence at all, right? But it still is like you see the level of racism that can happen, where it's just like, okay, yeah. All right. So it used to be called NACOCE. Now it's Fellowship of Chinese Evangelicals. So it's FACE. This is actually from 1979. So this document is actually older than me. And so in it described how Chinese, or how we look even at the Great Commission. Our brains look at the Great Commission differently. You guys know the Great Commission, right? Matthew 28:18-20. Therefore, go throughout all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and I'll be with you to the ends of the earth. So I'll zoom in a little more so you can see it. So what it talks about is using Caucasian, okay, or white. All right, but when you think of Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, ends of the earth, instead of community, state, country, world, that's what a white American will think. OBC, okay? If you don't like the OBC, you can call yourself a boba, which is brought over by airplane and not by boat. Okay, but then it's the boba community, ABCs, and so evangelism in the boba mind is boba community, boba Chinese, ABCs and bobas in Asia, Chinese elsewhere, other people in the world. But for us, ABCs in his community, in the state, US, world including Asia. So that's how we even, when we look at that text, we actually read it differently. Yeah. Very interesting. All right. This I just learned last week, and it's about Latinos, but it can be applied in the Chinese context. And it was about the author, Jared Alcantara. He writes this book about crossover preaching because he noticed that this man is actually black. But when he preaches, he was able to preach to whites with no problem. And he's like, that's very interesting. I want to learn more about how he can do that, because usually if you have people of different ethnic backgrounds, they kind of like to listen to some, although some might say I prefer the other one, but often like, how did he preach in which it was able to engage people of a different ethnic background? Because that can be difficult. And another thing that another book that I don't have here, but I have on Kindle, it talks about finding our voice, Asian preaching, in the Asian preaching context. Because and the idea is, if you were to go to your radio and you're changing stations, which we don't do anymore, right? But if you were to change stations, then if you were to listen to a speaker and you might hear a guy, oh, that's a black preacher. Oh, that's a white Southern preacher. Oh, that's Tim Keller, right? Oh, are you able to tell what I am when I'm preaching? You can't. And so it's like, why is that? And how do we still, even though our voice is not heard in the way we necessarily might preach, because we are that white adjacent. So many of the ways in which we even speak and preach is very more attuned to the white style of preaching. Nothing wrong with it, but it's just like, well, but how do we still address our Asian heritage and culture and the needs? That's still something that we need to consider, and that's what that book was also about. This one talks about types of Latinos, and I think if you just replace Latino with Chinese, then it actually helps me a little bit. I don't even remember all the definitions, but basically the first one is somebody who lives in that culture and language. Okay, so if it's a monocultural Chinese person, that means that you can operate in your Chinese and you don't need to learn anything else. And that happens in San Francisco. Okay, a Chinese person does not need to learn English if they don't want to. You go to the bank, the teller will speak English and Chinese and maybe another dialect. Okay, here, just English, right? So it's different, but in some places you can do that. The bicultural Latino or bicultural Chinese person, okay, that's gonna be us, maybe, okay, for those of us who are ABCs. But what it means is that you can go into a Chinese context and you can operate fine. You can speak in Chinese well enough to, or actually that one is where you're fluent in your language, which is easier for Latinos to speak Spanish. Okay, but like if there are those who you can speak Chinese fine, you can speak English fine when you're in an American context. Okay, the marginal Latino is one where they are outside of the Latino culture to an extent. It's more like some of us ABCs where it's just like, I can say a few words in Chinese. Okay, then there are those who are fleeing. For some reason, they don't even want to associate. The only thing that about them that is Latino is their last name. Okay, and then this kind of explains some more of like the returning, the assimilated. I don't remember what the new culture is. Okay, but he's explaining how like this is the nuclear one. Okay, and then here's a Latin American for Latino context, and you have immigrants, you have temporary immigrants, you have the fleeing, and then returning. And it's like, wow, this is more complex. I haven't bought the book yet, but it's just interesting that because when I look at, I think Chinese. I mean, every ethnic group when you're bridging a different culture and country, you're going to probably come across these things. And so I think it's going to be beneficial. I need to read the book so I can explain more about how perhaps that will help us in bicultural settings to understand. Because usually it's just like, oh, that person's ABC. But then sometimes it's like I'll think, or what makes a person Chinese?
MSG, no.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, I've heard people, oh, you have to be able to eat Chinese food. It's like, well, I mean, non-Chinese eat Chinese food. Right? And so what is it that makes it? Oh, is it that they can speak the language or they don't speak the language? I have a friend from San Francisco. He's 5th generation Chinese, doesn't know what dialect his parents and ancestors spoke. And then he doesn't speak Chinese. And so it's just like, in my mind, like, are you Chinese? Right? Because yes, on the outside, but at first, before all this AAPI stuff, I'm like, oh, it's hard to comprehend, but I guess it makes sense. So same thing, like types of Latinos or different types of Chinese. Lastly is Tan Fran. This is Tan Fran Mall if you've been to, I also want to say if you ever go to San Francisco, let me know, look me up. I'll make sure you are safe and I'll take you all the good places to eat and see. But this mall right here, the airport is over there. And this mall is where the Japanese internment camps used to be. So during World War II, the Japanese Americans, got a knock and said like, okay, pack up your stuff. You have like, I don't know, half an hour, grab whatever you want. And then they were put into, many of them into horse stables that over there. So after the internment camps were torn down, they put them all there, but they still wanted to have a memorial to acknowledge that this did happen. And so this is right next to the Bay Area Rapid Transit, it's called BART system. And so this is the Tan Fran Memorial, where you can see that there's two statues of 2 little kids with their suitcases. In the back over here, there's the names of almost 8,000 people, Japanese, that were put into little stables. And it is right next to the mall. You can see Target. But there's just more descriptions of the situation. You can see that that's all a family had. They got shoved into that. Yeah, and maybe 2 if the family was a little bit bigger. But you went from whatever house you had. And you got to think about it. When they came, they said, okay, bye-bye. You say bye-bye to your house. And then by the time you're let out, somebody is now living in your house, okay, because you didn't pay your property tax. So, okay, well, I guess the house is for sale. Who would like to move in? That's what happened. That was the injustice that happened to them because people thought, oh, you could be Japanese spies, and so we need to put you here for our own safety. We get the reason why, but still it was an injustice. Like what? They didn't really do much more. So here's a little more descriptions of it. And like here, it says, this wooden structure represents the horse stalls that many families were forced to live in, just steps from where you are now standing. The government did not build enough temporary barracks to accommodate 8,000 people, so families were assigned to the recently vacated horse stalls. Decades later, many who lived in a horse stall for months could still recall the smell of urine and horse manure that rose up through the floorboards. Wow. Blah, right? I don't think anybody will be able to eat if, if you're smelling all that. So just a few more photos of it. Okay, so I'm at the end of my talk. Any thoughts, questions? Take tips? No, just kidding. But yeah, any other, any thoughts? Go for it.
I feel like we as Asians still put ourselves as a perpetual foreigner, because whenever I have conversations, oh yeah, we can eat that, but Americans can't. And I always have to say, we are Americans. What are you saying Americans can't? Eat this Chinese food.
Right.
So I think we have to have a mindset even within ourselves to say, hey, yes, I am 100% American.
Right, and I think that's where it's not. We are Americans. We're Chinese, but we're not. Unless we are white, but we're not white. Then that's where it says like that's why I want to use like white or Caucasian, because there's a little difference there.
I have a different. So okay, the neighborhood we have, they're all white. Our good friends, our close friends are white. My kids go to Veritas. It's predominantly white. I say that because for them, for them color does not matter. But then they would come home and say, "Daddy, my friends are really making fun of my food. I'm eating seaweed, and they think that's disgusting. Like, is my food disgusting?" And so then I have to tell them, well, because they don't understand that there's other types of food, and we're Asian, and so like I'm not telling him you're a foreigner.
That happened to me, right? I'm sure it happened to you all at school, right? Your friends are like, "Ew, what is that? That looks disgusting." Not in San Francisco though, like people, but see, that's where it depends on where you are. On the other hand, yes.
Actually, I was thinking, I remember many years ago, and I heard it just like something like story. People said that you have like a cashier, right? You receive the $100 bills. You only need to know what is the true bill, right? You don't need to recognize the 100 versions of the fake bills. So for us, because we are believers, we are very Christians, I think we need to strengthen and establish our identity. We are the precious child of the Most High God. I think this is our identity.
For sure.
And then we need to ignore all other noises. I think like this Black Lives Matter, Asian Lives Matter, Chinese life, whatever life matters. I think this still is the kingdom of this world. I think that's the noises. Noises we need to ignore, and we focus on our identity in Christ and in the kingdom of God, and instill this concept or this to our children instead of. I think it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
My kids aren't a Christian school.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're right.
Yeah.
But the kids doesn't make them automatically Christians. They know probably more of the doctrines.
Yeah.
But to make it practical, I know that they don't mean to offend my kids.
Yeah.
I mean, they love them. They play with them. It's just sometimes tact or being blunt is their way of saying, I'm close to you. I can say this, and not knowing that they're saying, I didn't realize my food was offensive to you. So I understand. Yes, we have to be in Christ, but kids are going to be kids. Help them out and figure it out.
Let me answer, and then I will go to you. So, if I go back to my PowerPoint, if I can find it. Oops. Why is it doing that one?
There are people here who are fourth and fifth generation Americans. Pretty crazy.
Okay. But what was I going to say? Oh, so one of the pastors, the black pastors that we were talking with, he was like, yeah, like, Black lives do matter though, even though we're not affirming the actual organization, BLM, but again, it's that I'm tired aspect. But then when the AAPI stuff happened, he came back humbly and he said, guys, I got to tell you the story where my wife, she is watching TV And she is saddened because I keep saying silence is violence. My wife is now watching TV, and then she got mad at me because she's like, "Do you see these Asians that are the videos of Asians getting beaten up? That looks like it could be my auntie because she's Korean." And then so for him, he's like, "Oh, so I am now doing to her what I've been calling out others when you don't speak up." So so I'm not saying you got to protest, like you have to go to every protest, but there's acknowledgement certain things are happening, because otherwise, how are you then being, because he's like, "I'm not being a good husband at this point because I have ignored something that I didn't see, but my wife saw, and now I'm the person who is silent to the violence that's going on." So that's where it's like, yeah, so I agree with you. We need to stay focused, but there are times that if we don't pay attention, others who might, you can also offend them. Like an auntie, she forgot to, my wife's godmother, she was like, "Oh yeah, there was like somebody passed away in Taiwan. I didn't know, but I didn't read the news." And so when they asked, like, "How do you feel?" She's like, "What are you talking about?" And then offended that other person. And it's like, oh, it means that I still need to pay attention to some news so I can say, "Oh yeah, at least like, yeah, that was sad that the person passed away," even though you don't, like, you just want to be there to kind of sympathize. And so if you're not doing that, then that's not healthy. Even my friend Port, same thing. A Vietnamese family was driving up the 580 in Oakland, and then two rival gangs were shooting at each other on the freeway. One bullet hit a little boy, and he died. And so Port called me. He's like, "I just saw this in the news, and the little boy reminded me of one of your boys. So I just wanted to just call in and see how you're doing." And I was just like, "Well, I'm good." But then I was like, "Why is he calling you about this?" Oh, I see what he's doing, because he's trying to empathize with me just in case I am feeling I'm tired, right? And so that's what he was doing. He's trying to show he's my brother, and not in any guilty way. He just saw it and it's like, "Oh, I just need to call Ben." And so I think that's where we can also, because of our cultural situation in which we're in, we can do that for others. Yeah.
I would also say in Revelations, our ethnics will still be there.
Yeah.
It says all nations.
Yeah.
It's not going to be wiped away in Christ. We'll be absorbed. We're there,
right.
But I'm still Filipino.
Right. All nations will be praising God. Yes.
A lot of focuses have been on identity.
Mm-hmm.
For a Christian, as you say, your identity is that you are created by God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what defines really your value as a person. That's the idea behind all men are created equal. And so, it's a gold cup, and we all have a crack in the cup. But in Jesus, what repairs that gold cup? Your appearance is simply the window dressing on the gold cup. And so, if you think that the value of the cup is, what's scratched on the outside, then you're missing. You're stupid. You're thinking the value of the gold. You're in the jungle, you come across this route, people with gold cups. The first guy walks over to say, "I'll trade you my gold cup for the cheap pen you got in your pocket." You say, "Fine." And the guy standing next to him says, "You just got ripped off this little cup or anything. It's got little stickers going outside of it. Look at my gold cup. I'll trade you that for another little cheap pen you got in your pocket." These people are stupid. They don't. So if you have God, then your identity is and your value as a person comes from God, not from these other things. So the danger I think that you face for in dealing with a non-Christian world and how it's approaching racial subjects is that you fall into the same trap, and you, instead of identifying that your value is that all men are created by God, that all men are sinners, that you're falling in. If you identify people by their racial things, then at some point you begin to fall into the same thing. So your identity, and so I think that non-Christians, some political parties want you to identify your identity purely by your race and turn you to blame the other race. But in many cases, projection.
Right. I don't want to blame other races, but but.
He was interesting, and he was facing the same question about was the United States Constitution racist? And because after he escaped from slavery, he went to speaker for the Northern abolitionists, and their position is that we need to separate from the South, who were evil in slavery. We have 1850 or so, want the slaves to be slaves. And he had to say, well, you're right. And he came back and broke with the Northern and with these other abolitionists, starting his own newspaper, Liberator, and said, no, in heat, Brown, and Creed, they recognized that slavery was not going to end without violence. And he actually met with Brown and Old Quarry in Pennsylvania, but then he backed out because he said, you're going to get here. This is crazy, you're planning. But he convinced Lincoln the only way we're going to end this war is to emancipate slaves and put them in the market. Otherwise, we're going to end in slavery. Lincoln listened to him right. So the point was is that Douglas faced the same thing he did now. He said the Constitution is not inherently racist. And so as Christians and as Americans, we should identify with those things actually should unite us. That we share a Christian identity, and as Americans, we still need to believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So those things we should.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Your thoughts?
I see that, I get that. But I'm thinking in this point of view, and I'll change the scenario instead of talking about ethnic race. I'm thinking about like the marginalized. Yeah, in a sense, like when Jesus was trapped by the Pharisees in I think it's in Matthew 19 about divorce. And it says, "Can you divorce for anything?" And then actually, Jesus says you're not supposed to divorce, created man. But if you notice what he argued for, he was actually looking out for the marginalized women. Meaning he was saying the point is, can we divorce a woman for anything? So it's like, it's more of a man's world. He says, don't you understand? Before the divorce, your hard hearts, this is it. But the point is, God was reaching out and saying, I care for the women who have no voice. And want you to know that, yes, all men are created equal. All women are created equal too. And I think that's where you're trying to come from. Or more like, we want to know, like, yes, we're all created equal, but some people really had a bad, shaken life. And if we don't show the marginalized, I hear you, the question is, can they hear us when we say, God bless you? Or, what I'm saying, like, you're just saying that, but did you really mean it? Because that's where you're coming from. So, just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, I agree, yeah.
I agree with what you're saying about the Constitution, not being inherently racist, and like the founding fathers being rooted in like this faith, and that's where it's coming from. But I think what led to like racism is the misapplication of those principles. Like I would argue the truth is compromise is not really all men are created equal, and so if you arguing that the Constitution is Christian and then going and doing these things, like applying the Constitution falsely, it besmirches the name of the Constitution and Christianity if you are claiming under this title, etc. Yeah, woman as well. So, but like the times are changing to where like you like think about these cultural contexts more, and like I think even as we're united in the church as a multi-ethnic church of Jews and Gentiles, that it's important not to just forget about our differences, but to learn about each other's differences, because these are all going to be things in heaven, and like you need to understand the cultural context of where certain people come from, just to like interact with them in an edifying way. So I think it's important to recognize that we are united in Christ, but oftentimes if we just try to ignore the differences between each race, you kind of just diminish the issues more. Like you never address it, and by understanding each other's differences, we can become more united as a body of Christ, because we understand where you're coming from, and things like that. So
Keep going.
No.
Okay, so he actually says he doesn't like to use the word race except to say the human race. He doesn't want to call like the black race, the white Asian race, or whatever, because we're all created by God equally. Jesus' love comes on all of us equally. Okay, so we're the human race, but there's different ethnic groups and backgrounds. And let me see. I skipped this one, but maybe we can go back to it real quick. It says and see, like this could be taken out of context, and it probably was during slave times. It says, therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. So a slave master or even the pastor could abuse a text like this and say, for rulers or the master are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is a servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. So something like that, it could be. And in Frederick Douglass's autobiography, he even describes it where he's inside the master's house, and the pastor actually comes in, and they're holding like a prayer meeting or something, and totally like ignores all the harsh slave things that happen. And then he's about to say, and the pastor's from this denomination. I'm like, not SBC, please, not Baptist. And he's like, it gives another one, like, oh, thank you, Jesus. But maybe there were still Baptists who were doing it. But I'm like, at least there wasn't a Baptist towards Frederick Douglass. But it was brutal, the things that he had to go through, and that's why he even had to run away. So it's not. I'm not saying anything about like it's not America that's evil, but there were evil practices happening, and that's just like we need to know that just so that we can help our children understand. Otherwise, if we don't talk about it, it happens again. That's yeah. Yeah, from the Middle East, from Nazareth, and then yeah.
Also all spread throughout the Mediterranean, Greece, Turkey, all over Sicily. He was the Great Commission.
Right.
Christianity was in China 1,000 years before.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've seen there, when I visited Shanghai, we went to, I think it was called Xi'an, and then as I'm walking through one of the gardens, there's an area where like, oh, there's a picture right here where the Chinese are actually Christians, and they were worshiping God in this picture. I'm like, that's pretty cool. Yeah, if you guys want to leave, that's okay. Yeah, but if there's any other thoughts, then, oh wow, it's already 3:22. Okay.
During the Taiping Rebellion, the guy thought he was like Jesus' brother, and then he like
led a whole army against
Yeah.
the